There is a particular kind of attention you have spent years trying to earn. You have explained yourself carefully, defended your choices, softened your opinions to avoid friction, chased approval down hallway after hallway of other people's expectations, and still, somehow, respect has often felt just slightly out of reach, arriving in smaller portions than the effort seemed to deserve. Why does chasing respect so often fail to produce it? Why do some people seem to receive consideration effortlessly, without ever appearing to ask for it at all? Before we explore this together, subscribe to this channel where we uncover the hidden psychology behind everyday life. Picture a lantern carried through a crowded room, its light constant regardless of who happens to be watching. It does not flare brighter for an important guest, or dim apologetically in the presence of someone difficult. It simply burns at the same steady temperature, indifferent to the shifting opinions moving around it. People are drawn to a light like this, not because it demands their attention, but because it never once wavers to secure it. Is that light stubborn? Or is it simply undivided? Carl Jung believed that much of our suffering comes from living too entirely inside the persona, the curated self, endlessly adjusted according to whoever happens to be in the room. But what if the one thing capable of changing how people treat you is not a technique at all, but a return to something steadier underneath the performance? What if the shift people notice in you has nothing to do with what you say, and everything to do with what you finally stop doing? Here is the one thing worth naming plainly. People begin treating you differently the moment you stop needing their approval in order to feel complete. Not colder, not detached, simply steady, no longer rearranging yourself to fit whatever mood has entered the room. Why does this single shift change so much when nothing else about you has actually changed? Perhaps because people can sense, often before they consciously register it, whether they are speaking to someone whole or someone quietly waiting to be completed by their reaction. Consider how this plays out. The person who apologizes reflexively, who explains themselves at length for decisions that require no explanation, who visibly softens the moment disapproval enters a room. This person, however kind, often receives less consideration than the one who states a boundary plainly and lets it stand without excessive justification. Why does over-explaining invite more scrutiny rather than less? Because it signals, however unintentionally, that your position is still open for negotiation. Alfred Adler believed that much of human behavior is driven by an underlying will toward significance, and paradoxically, the more visibly a person chases that significance through others' approval, the less convincing that significance appears. But the person who has quietly made peace with their own worth, independent of anyone else's verdict, radiates something that cannot be manufactured through technique alone. Is that confidence, in the way it's often described? Or is it something closer to completeness, the simple absence of a hole that needs filling by someone else's opinion? Jung called the process of becoming this kind of person individuation, not arrogance, not indifference to others, but the slow assembly of a self that no longer requires external validation to feel real. And here is the difficult truth worth sitting with. You cannot perform this. People sense borrowed confidence the way they sense a wavering light, inconsistent, occasionally convincing, but never quite steady enough to fully trust. So why does this feel so difficult to embody, even once you understand it intellectually? Because for many people, the habit of seeking approval was built early, quietly, before there was any language to question it. It becomes, over years, not a strategy but an identity, and identities do not change simply because they are understood. Picture the tree standing bare through winter, appearing from a distance like something finished, something without depth. Beneath the surface, unseen, the roots continue widening in the dark, gathering strength invisible to anyone simply glancing past it. Is the quiet you feel when you stop chasing approval truly emptiness? Or is it simply the visible surface of something steadier finally beginning to take root underneath? This is the turn worth making gently here. the discomfort of no longer over-explaining yourself, of allowing a silence to remain unfilled, of letting someone's disapproval simply exist without immediately rushing to correct it. This discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is often the exact sensation of individuation beginning to take hold. It rarely feels graceful at first. It tends to feel initially like exposure. Only later does it begin to feel like solid ground. So how do you actually begin practicing this, moment to moment? This is where the observer becomes essential, the quiet witness inside you, capable of noticing the reflex to please before it takes over completely. Not the part of you that immediately begins softening a sentence the moment someone's expression shifts. The part that can simply notice, calmly, I feel the urge to over-explain right now, and I do not have to obey it. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that very little in life requires as much energy as we instinctively give it, that most disturbances shrink considerably once examined honestly, rather than reacted to immediately. Can you feel the pull to justify yourself unnecessarily? And pause there, choosing instead to let your original statement simply stand. Can you allow someone's silence, or even their mild disapproval, to exist without treating it as an emergency requiring your immediate management? And here is something worth noticing. If you look honestly, this particular pattern, the reflex to earn approval through explanation, apology, or accommodation, has likely repeated itself across many relationships, many rooms, many years, wearing different faces but following the same familiar shape. Why does life seem to recreate this same dynamic again and again, until it is finally recognized and, eventually, released? Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious in us tends to reappear in our lives as pattern, as the uncanny sense of having stood in this exact position before, seeking approval from someone new who resembles, in some essential way, everyone who came before them. Perhaps this is not simply about the people currently in your life. Perhaps it is the newest version of an older question. When did you first learn that your worth required someone else's confirmation? And are you finally ready to stop asking for it? Viktor Frankl believed that between what happens to a person and how they respond, a space exists narrow but entirely their own. You cannot control how others initially react to a steadier version of you. But the space between noticing your old reflex to please and choosing, instead, to remain calmly yourself, that space belongs entirely to you. So what does this one shift actually look like in ordinary practice? Not something dramatic. Not a single bold announcement that changes everything overnight. It might look like stating a boundary once, clearly, and resisting the urge to justify it 3 additional times. It might look like sitting with someone's mild disappointment in you without immediately working to repair it. It might look like choosing peace over the exhausting need to be understood by absolutely everyone in the room. It might look like allowing a silence after you speak to remain simply silent rather than rushing to fill it with reassurance no one actually asked for. None of this arrives with fanfare. Jung once suggested that people will do almost anything to avoid the discomfort of standing fully in their own authority. And if that is true, then simply allowing your own words to stand unexplained may already be a significant act of courage. Return, for a moment, to the lantern, carried steadily through a crowded room. Imagine holding it now, not to impress anyone standing nearby, not to prove anything to whoever happens to be watching, but simply because it is yours, and it burns the same regardless of who enters or leaves the room. Does that feel like less warmth to offer others? Or does it simply mean the warmth no longer depends on their permission to exist? And so we return to the question beneath this single shift, beneath every reflexive apology, every unnecessary explanation, every moment spent waiting for someone else's approval before feeling entitled to your own certainty. What actually remains of you, once you no longer require anyone else's verdict to feel complete? What remains when your steadiness no longer rises and falls with someone else's opinion of you? Jung offered an answer that has outlasted him by nearly a century, Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Perhaps the one thing capable of changing how people treat you was never a technique to learn at all. Perhaps it was simply a return to the steadier self that existed, quietly, long before you learned to trade it for approval. If this resonated, subscribe to this channel and join us as we keep uncovering these hidden truths. What is one place in your life where you are learning to stop over-explaining yourself? Write it in the comments below, and let that lantern, wherever you carry it, finally burn at its own steady pace.